It's a new year and we've got tons of first-person shooters coming. I'm Falcon and today on GameRanks, 20 new FPS games of 2018. Number 20 is War of Rights, an FPS set in the Civil War. Now there's a reason why people haven't really tried to take on the Civil War, and that is because the war technology is so different. That said, the developer Campfire Games is leaning into that really well. First off, the game's made using CryEngine, and clearly they're very talented because the environments in this game look great. But the combat rifles that take a long time to reload, the pistols, the battle formations that are being used, they're going for historical accuracy, and because of that, it's making a game that is utterly different from anything I have seen, and if it actually turns out to be paced well and balanced well, is going to be really unique. Number 19 is Serious Sam 4, a game about a time-traveling man stopping an alien horde in various places and settings in the world. Serious Sam is unique in that it has a lot of very wide open environments having you fight hordes of enemies, and the game has been under development for a while now, announced in 2014. It will be a prequel to Serious Sam 3, which seems to be the general direction they move in, and the game apparently will retain a number of features and multiplayer modes from previous installments. They made heavy implications this was going to come out last year, but that obviously didn't happen. So let's all cross our fingers. Number 18, Blackroom is a first-person shooter intended to return to the glory days of Doom, old school Doom. This is because John Romero and Adrian Carmack, two of the founders of id Software, are the people who are making this game. Blackroom intends to be a jump back into the more classic era of FPSs, with controls that are intended to be a lot like Quake. It's a very interesting project, and I hope that they release something more substantial soon because it's supposed to be out in December of this year. Number 17 is Witchfire from the creators of The Vanishing of Ethan Carter. Now, that might make you say, what? But rest assured, this is a really good looking game. It has the same kind of environmental detail and style that you saw in Ethan Carter, but with mystic enemies that you use guns and magic powers against, and have a couple of abilities that are on display even in the trailer that obviously make the game a little bit different. There's a dash ability, for instance, that I think looks pretty cool. It reminds me a little bit of Vampire, except in the context of a first-person shooter. It also has a really cool art style as far as the enemies go. Now, they haven't released much info, but we really hope to see this year. It looks phenomenal. Number 16 is Warhammer Vermintide 2. Now, a game that is structured somewhat like Left 4 Dead, a cooperative shooter / melee game set in first person, but also set in Warhammer End Times. The original was hailed as a game that did a great job encouraging players to actually cooperate when playing co-op. The game had some criticism for its AI and some balancing issues, but I don't think they were bad enough to really care about. The first game was great, and if they take any of that criticism to heart, this game will be phenomenal. Number 15 is Hell Let Loose, a 100-player, multiplayer World War II simulation game where you'll experience accurate recreations of various different battles. Accurate down to the point where players will definitely do what they want, but still. It's an indie game that some people are calling a better Call of Duty World War II, but I think it kind of is apples to oranges. This is a different kind of game, and for people who like a more simulation-oriented experience, I think is going to be a lot better anyhow. Number 14 is Deep Rock Galactic, which kind of reminds me of a combination of Left 4 Dead and No Man's Sky, which I know sounds ridiculous, but it's procedurally generated, mineable environments that you do 4-player, fast-paced, arcade-type co-op shooting in as well. Frankly, this is the spin on the No Man's Sky type game that I didn't know I wanted very badly, but I do. Number 13 is Scorn, a game that takes place inside a big techno-organic type possibly building, possibly living thing, and has a bit of a 1990s Tool album cover vibe going. It's intended to be a surreal game where you'll be solving the mystery of where the hell you are, what the hell it is, and every new area of the game intends to have its own story, no doubt with some nightmarish, surrealist message. It's an interesting looking game, and if it manages to be fun on top of looking so unique for a game that's coming out nowadays, I think could be something special. Number 12 is Ready or Not, a tactical FPS that seems in a lot of ways very similar to the SWAT games, except maybe a bit more serious. You're going to have an analysis and planning phase, and the gameplay intends to be very heavily involved. evolved, intending to be more of a simulation than SWAT was intended to be. However, I think that making a more true-to-life tactical shooter is a great idea, and from the trailer and the gameplay we've seen, this is going to be a different game that is really deep and heavily involved. Number 11 is Atomic Heart, which looks to me kind of like if you put BioShock in Soviet Russia and made it more like Wolfenstein. Frankly, I can't tell you how interesting this game is. It looks so bizarre. It's set in an alternate history, Soviet Russia. Just from the footage, you probably don't have a lot of difficulty figuring out why I compared it to BioShock, and for that matter, Wolfenstein. It's almost self-explanatory, but it's being labeled as an adventure shooter. However, the gameplay we're seeing is nice and fast-paced, so I feel like it may actually come with an interesting story as well. Some of those doll things are just absolutely ridiculous looking and will be the stuff of nightmares. I cannot wait. Number 10 is GTFO, a 4-player co-op atmospheric game from the developers of Payday. The game takes place in an underground complex that has been overrun by quote-unquote horrifying monsters, and I hate to keep bringing up Left 4 Dead, but in some ways it looks a little bit like a sci-fi Left 4 Dead, although the gameplay does look a little bit slower paced, maybe a little bit less arcadey, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I pretty much like all styles of FPS. It's just the execution that matters to me. But there's a certain sense of style that is coming through in all of the material that we've seen so far that has me excited, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of it. Number 9 is Punt Showdown is a monster hunting FPS that kind of, and I mean kind of, acts as a really grim Monster Hunter style FPS. Not full-blown Monster Hunter style, keep in mind, it is much more grim. It is very, very obviously intended to be more hardcore. There's permadeath, and generally the atmosphere reads as a little bit more of a tactical / survival oriented game. Still, to incorporate the monster hunting element into a game like this, I think is a cool idea. Having a big survival game with huge boss monsters just seems like a great plan, and I'm really looking forward to it. Number 8 is Borderlands 3, the extremely visually unique series that is also very funny. Looks as though it's finally getting a long-awaited sequel. Now, they've moved Borderlands to the Unreal 4 engine, so it seems like it's going to be getting a visual upgrade. We've seen a couple of tech demos, and they do look better, but fortunately they haven't traveled too far from the original style, because that's kind of something that everybody loves about the game, obviously. Story-wise, obviously we don't know a whole lot, but apparently it's going to take place on more than just Pandora, because they talked about how the engine would allow them to have differing physics in different locations, and they wanted to take advantage of that. So at least we can expect some new ideas, and come on, it's Borderlands. Number 7 is the System Shock remake, obviously one of the more important video games of all time. Inspired a lot of what we see in video games now with the resource management and pieces of lore dropped around. System Shock is a game that has such an interesting narrative and manages to tell it in such a great way that so many different interpretations of that method have been experimented with over the years. Of course, they'll be adding more modern aspects to it, such as physics, the ability to freeze enemies, knock them into a million pieces convincingly, and it overall looks like it's really going to be keeping up and expanding upon what System Shock is. Number 6 is Overkill's The Walking Dead is coming this year, and it is a 4-player co-op FPS set in Washington, D.C. after the zombie apocalypse that happens in The Walking Dead. Now, they've set this up as a character-driven game, so it's easy to get the Left 4 Dead vibes, but it kind of looks as though it might be a little less arcade-oriented. Not a lot less, it's being developed by the same people who made Payday, but I would expect the norms from Payday more than I would Left 4 Dead. Each of the characters has their own specific skill tree, and they work as different classes in the game with different skills, and in a lot of ways this is kind of the Walking Dead game I've always wanted. Hopefully it ends up being exactly that. Number 5 is Escape from Tarkov, which we've covered on the channel before. It's not so unlike Arma 3, but it seems to be a lot more objective based. Now, there is free roam once you've completed those missions, so it's not like you're stuck playing the same missions over and over, but it's a pretty open-ended game that works this sort of dystopian rot angle in a closed off area of a Russian city with kind of Elder Scrolls style skill trees and leveling. If you've played the beta, you pretty much know what you're getting, but the full release is happening this year, and it's a game that remains very popular. It's also a tough game, but that's how a lot of people like them. Number 4 is Battalion 1944, a crowd-funded World War II game running on Unreal 4. It's one of those Kickstarters that did extremely well, extremely quick, and was picked up by Square Enix not long after. Their intent is to quote-unquote recapture the core of classic multiplayer shooters and revive old-school first-person shooters for the next generation. Now clearly it means old school as in early to mid-2000s. But it is a good-looking game that's got a lot of potential, and I look forward to when the beta launches next month. Number 3 is an unannounced Call of Duty game. Now, we don't really have a lot of information on this, but I think that there's a decent chance it's going to be Black Ops 4, and it's going to have a Battle Royale mode for the multiplayer aside from just regular multiplayer and the zombie stuff. It just seems like something they do, and it's Treyarch, so it's probably going to be a little bit more experimental. That's good because although Call of Duty World War II was good, I do like them not sticking to a template. Number 2 is Metro Exodus, which will continue the story of Last Light. For those unfamiliar, Metro is a game set in a post-apocalyptic Russia. There's been a nuclear winter, there's monsters, and the game itself has a very unique look. It's great because it's a mixture of linear levels and sandbox environments. At least that's what they're saying. I like the idea of having both personally, and as a fan of Last Light, I'm excited for it. And finally, there's Far Cry 5, an action adventure that if you understand Far Cry, you do know where we're going, except for it's something that takes place in the United States. It's an interesting idea because it's already caused a little bit of controversy, but it is actually also holding over some stuff from Far Cry Primal, like the ability to tame wild animals. They're also trying to make it so that players' experiences vary further when they go out and try to play the game, and frankly the imagery to the game is just very interesting this time around. But I don't expect it to be too far from what we know as Far Cry. Probably going to be a fairly familiar game with some new stuff put in, obviously an upgrade in the graphics, and what could be a very interesting story. What's the first-person shooter you are looking forward to most this year? There's a lot of very creative ones. Frankly, I think it looks like a very good year for them. Leave a comment, and if you like this video, please click like. If you're not subscribed, now would be a good time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at FalconTheHero, and we'll see you next time right here on GameRanks.